Welcome to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and during this series, I'll be interviewing various thought leaders, wellness experts, and humans on how they practice sustainable self-care and mindfulness. We'll get real and raw, talk about the light and the shadow side of self-care and mindfulness, and how we can actually stay centered amid the chaos and the hustle and bustle of our modern day world. So settle in and get centered. This podcast episode is brought to you by Centered in the City, a virtual on-demand self-care and mindfulness platform with different meditations, journaling prompts, nourishing recipes, and Pilates flows, all designed to support you feeling calm, focused, and energized as you live your life in this modern day world. For more information, head on over to centeredinthecity.com. Welcome back to the Centered in the City podcast. My name is Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing Sarah Simon, who you might know as the Mint Gardener on Instagram. Sarah is an artist, an educator, and an author who supports people through her Instagram platform and online painting classes, courses, retreats, and of course her books. She supports people tapping into the joy of creating. In today's conversation, we talk about that, the joy of creating and how to be in creation mode, whether you are physically creating art or whether you are at work creating a product or presentation or even just in a creative brainstorm session. How to be in creation and put down the inner critic that we all have. Sarah's blooming energy is so delightful to be around, so I know you're going to enjoy this episode. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Sarah, welcome to the Center in the City podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you today.
You're one of the kindest, warm-hearted people I've met in a very, very long time. So I'm so honored to have you on the show and for listeners to get a little sneak peek into your glowing beamingness.
Thank you. That's so kind of you to say. No, I remember when we first met at my book launch and you came and I didn't know your face yet. And it was just an automatic connection. It was so easy to speak with you. And, when you speak with someone and they make eye contact with you and you can tell they're really listening, you were doing that. In this crowded, wild room with so much noise and so much stimulus, you were like right there with me. So thank you. It's such an honor to meet you and to get to do this with you. It's fun. And you came and partied at my garden party too.
Yeah.
Another one. So thank you.
Oh my God, I felt honored and thank you for that. That's very touching, means a lot to me. Well, I want to kick us off with one of my favorite questions of what does being centered mean to you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. It's hard for me to answer what it looks like for me to be centered without speaking to the Enneagram. Are you pretty familiar with the Enneagram? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I'm assuming that means your listeners are as well. But in Enneagram, I'm a 3-wing 4. And you are you as well?
I love that you're bringing this up because I'm still debating if I'm a 3 or a 4. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe that I'm a wing, but I thought I was a 3 too. Anyway, so please, I can't wait to hear where you go with this.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I know it's just a tool and it's just a way for me to understand heart motive. And it's also a way for me to kind of gut check myself. I remember when I first found my number, I was sitting in this lovely book club and I was with dear, dear friends, and 2 of them were 4s. And when they explained what a 4 was, I thought, absolutely, of course, I'm this cool individualist artist, and I took it and it didn't say I was a 4. It said I was a 3. And so when my friend Brittany, who to this day doesn't let me live this down, it's pretty awesome. She goes, what did it say? I go, a 4. She goes, liar. which is such a good mark. I was like, oh, this is all just crap. Anyway, she's like, no, Sarah. She's like, you're a 3. I was like, oh, don't. That's so embarrassing. How did you know? Um, and she goes, you are so hard on 3s. As we've known each other for a very long time now. And it's so funny because one of the main things that a 3 does when they're not operating in their best self is like duck and manipulate and deceive. And it's like smoke and mirrors. So it's so funny that I was like, no, I'm a 4. But we took she sent a few more tests to me and I kind of deep dived it more. And she was like, yeah, you do have a wing of a 4. I think with the Enneagram, I think you can wing both ways. I don't know, I'm not one of the desert fathers, but I would say that sometimes I do wing to my 2, more times I'm winging to my 4. And when I'm in my most centered, happy place, I am not working for the approval of my worth. And so I have to continually circle back at the end of my day or even at the beginning sometimes and go, Sarah, you're worthy of just being here. You're worthy of working out. You're worthy of taking the whole day just to paint, even if you don't get your checklist done, even if you don't hit all your to-dos, even if you go backwards on Instagram. That does not define your worth as a human. And it's wild how I have to continually tell myself that. But that is when I am most centered. So when I am most centered and peaceful and the best Sarah self, I usually have had like a really good balance of like really fun parties, like my garden party, but then also lots of really quiet time where I've read good books and I've had lots of hot bubble baths and I've had time to paint. Because I feel like I'm my best self when I'm in that flow state and the rest of the world's opinion about what I'm creating on this paper doesn't matter to me. It matters that joy of creation during the process of it, and that I feel like it was good. It was good. And it doesn't matter if it gets a lot of likes or not, but I took the time to create, and that's a very long answer to your question.
Oh my, I have so many juicy things I want to explore with you around this. So, one aspect of the Enneagram that I have been hearing as I've gotten deeper into it is the tests don't really work.
Mm,
And that you, like, because I've taken the test too and I've come off as a 3. However, then when I've been reading more about it or listening to like audio explorations, I've been wondering if I'm a 4.
mm,
And Susan Piver, I don't know if you know her, she wrote a book, I want to say last year, might have been longer ago now, called The Buddhist Enneagram. And she actually came on the podcast. So I'll send you the link, and listeners will be in the show notes if you want to listen to that, around finding your own number and what that means for you. So resonate with the piece. And I think a lot of my listeners can too, around this thing with the high achievers, which achievers is 3, and that place of feeling centered when you know your innate worthiness, and how much we in our society and North American Western culture tie our sense of worth to our productivity and to our output and to what type of feedback and accolades and achievements we're receiving. And hearing from you, who's very accomplished and like have gotten to do all these amazing traveling adventures with your artwork, and to have the following and the impact that you do with your work, to hear that you also continue have to work on that inner self dialogue is just very grounding. And I appreciate your vulnerability and transparency with that. What are ways that you practice saying to yourself or connecting to that sense of self worth?
yeah. No, thanks for that. Yeah, no, it's growing up, it was always like this. I didn't understand why I needed to like put myself out there and wait for that ping pong reflection back. I didn't understand that. And so in high school, it was like I could be this multifaceted person. I could be a different person. I could be whoever anyone wanted me to be. I could be a chameleon. And then when both, like, two different or three different people from different spheres connected and they'd come to me, it was like this huge conundrum to figure out how and who I was and what who I was to what. And I remember sitting in college and writing down lists of what different people knew about me so that I could keep my story straight. Because it was like I wanted to be this like outgoing, fun, dynamic human to these people, and then these other people. I was like, but I really do enjoy like my nerdy fantasy reads and give me all the dragons and fairies. But those people didn't like that I went to parties. And so I was like, how do I be all these things? And then I'm like, am I a fake? Am I a phony? So again, I was looking at outer feedback to define who Sarah was. And that just one, it's a huge slippery slope, which we all know that's what social media gives us back. Whether we're looking at people's photos and realizing that we're taking it in, like, or not. I mean, from all outside, appearances, people are like, oh my gosh, Sarah, you're so busy. You're doing so much. You're so successful. You must be so secure in who you are and what you're doing. And I think that that is just one of the greatest lies that we all believe because of social media. I don't think anyone feels secure. I don't think anyone, or at least you can't feel secure by looking at outer reflections. I don't know what you believe, but I believe in Jesus, and I believe that what he said, it is finished. That's where I go to redefine who I am. I have to go back to the basic, knowing that no matter what I do with my day to day, did I love people? That's my that's my meter. It's, did I choose others before myself? And so instead of looking at Instagram messages or likes, by the way, I've turned them all off, all my Instagram likes. I don't know what my posts do anymore, and it's such a healthier choice. Um, but at the end of the day, it's like, all right, did I choose to do a movie night with my girls and comb out their hair and do their braids after bath time and have bonding time with them? Or did I choose to doom scroll? Just small little choices throughout my day that again are not outer reflections of like what people thought of me, but it's like inside I knew what the right thing was to do, and did I choose it? And those are usually my best days, and those are usually my days where I can recenter, um, and avoid the doom scrolling, or verbally tell myself, Sarah, get off Instagram, this isn't helping you. So yeah, that's honestly probably the base. It's like getting back to the roots of like, did I love others? Did I do well in that? Or sometimes just digging in the dirt feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of all the tech, and it's that slow recentering. I listened to this incredible podcast, which I can share with you so you can put it in the listener notes. But it was called The Effort Driven Reward Cycle, which I think we are all caught in, this hamster wheel. And I think there is something really good about doing things that are like, it's that effort driven, and then we receive a reward. Like, there is good work to be done, whether it's you know digging in your garden, or I mean, my work is Instagram, so I do need to be on it. So it's like finding ways to do things in a healthy, good way. But this TED Talk was this incredible scientist, and she was talking about how our society has gotten away from the part in our brain that releases all the happy chemicals in this effort-driven reward cycle. So, for example, she talks about it was like a 1940s or 1950s World Fair, they introduced the television. And they said, we know that this form of entertainment will never replace the radio, because who in their right mind has time to put their physical body in front of this tube that is flashing images at you and to do nothing but watch a screen? Who has time for that? We know that this isn't sustainable, but maybe it'll be fun. So this study that she was proposing was this idea that when families would gather in community around a radio, one, it was in community. It wasn't ever really by themselves, but if it was, they would still be doing something with their hands that didn't require their eyes to be engaged in a television. So they would be shelling peas, they'd be knitting, they'd be doing tasks that needed to be done in the service of others. So this idea that we sit in front of a television, we are not engaging or resting. We're kind of, a little bit of zombieing. But this was the whole TED Talk, was just the idea that she also tied it into like the rising rates of depression and anxiety. And of course, we need medicine, but we like need this Western and Eastern balance, right? And this idea that yes, you need medicine to get your chemicals back on track. But is there anything that we can do intrinsically within our day and habits where we can work them back into our lives, something that we maybe have sloughed off? And something I've noticed with my kids or just me when I spend time drawing is I'm doing something physically with my hands. I'm required to move slow, and I have accomplished something with my hands, and it's all physical. It's all with my own body. So it's a very interesting idea. And I do notice that in the summer, like encouraging my kids to go outside more, to go
Mm-hmm.
play, to make forts, to work with clay, to just leave. I call it hummingbird art. I just leave large like swaths of like craft paper and like cool markers or paints or things people have sent me that I'm like, well, I've got lots. Like if the neighborhood's could kids come over and ruin it, no big deal. But I just like leave it out. And it is amazing the quiet play and joy that comes
Mm.
just from leaving stuff out, not keeping it perfectly clean, not defaulting. I mean, I'm pro screen for the kids. That's my sanity. I get it. But there is this beauty in like like trying to build those practices back in. And I think it recenters all of us.
Yeah. Oof, yeah. And it's really interesting cycling back to this. I mean, we could, there's so much here around our forms of entertainment and how they've changed, and how now with, on demand Netflix and screening at any time, right? Like back in the day when we did watch TV, it was like Friends is on at 8 p.m. You'd all gather. It was a community event, and it was scheduled, and time was kind of sacred in that sense. But now when you can do it anytime, anywhere, the lines are blurred, and we kind of need more boundaries around that. And I love what you're saying around getting in touch with our hands, getting our hands dirty. I try on the weekends to like put my cell phone somewhere and just like not touch it, and get like lose it in the house, because during the week it can be so destructive. And even just, I've been really consistent and grateful for it, the consistency. But in the morning, I am not touching Instagram or even my text messages or emails before I do some, like at least 30 minutes of writing. And it is helping tremendously to just like focus on a priority, because otherwise I can feel, I think as a 3, my attention go outwards to, oh, what's the world telling me I should be doing right now? What's shiny? What's, so to really anchor back into like, what's my voice? What are my priorities? Has been so helpful. And I love this idea around just having arts and crafts out, because that just invites more play and freedom and doodling, and versus like, oh, this is a box in the closet that we only bring out for special occasions. Because if that's the case, I feel like it never gets brought out.
It's true. True. Leaving it out and letting it be messy is hard because, again, like a 3, I've got my checklist, and if things are a little bit messy, it feels chaotic. But I started it when my kids were really little, like tiny, and they're just starting to hold markers, and half the time they were chewing on them. But I noticed how cool it was. And now their friends come over and they're like, oh, do you have those cool new markers? Oh my gosh. And the things that they create, I find I'm also more willing to try and to just doodle out an idea because the craft paper is laying out and it feels fun. I mean, usually it's not like, oh, this is not Instagrammable, but since you like it, wait, I might be trying to, maybe I'll call it the Hummingbird Art Project and just,
Yes. I
right?
think that's so, especially for summer, just like that sense of freedom, play. Please get it out there. How did you even start your relationship with creativity? Like where did you begin and how did you even practice like trusting yourself in your art journey to bring it to where it is now?
I think some of my earliest recollections of art was getting the Archie and Veronica comic books at the grocery store. And I loved just the dynamic. Obviously, the social relationships were appealing, but then the art, it felt approachable and I could draw it. And it was really fun. So I started like tracing Archie and Veronica. I remember doing that. Um, but art has been kind of a thing for my whole life. My mom and my grandmother are both incredible oil painters. And so it's in my blood. So I think it's so interesting talking about art and like I had one lady this my last art retreat that we had in Seattle, like these long art retreats where it's not just a 2 hour class. It's like, do you want to immerse yourself for a few days? And we spoil everyone with like bougie dinners and you dress up. We have a gallery. It's really fun. But it also gives you time to just kind of actually slow down and start, like you said, when you're writing, listening to who you are and what you want to say rather than trying to reflect back what you think the world wants from you. Art is so important to be able to pause and to actually express what you want to say. Because oftentimes, if you're creating from a place of like, oh, I think they want this, that's the stuff that comes out that feels like it looks like everyone else's and it doesn't feel true and it feels kind of gross. But uh she asked me during our retreat, she goes, okay, tell me honestly, how much of this is raw talent and how much of this is actual practice? Like, can I get here? And so I always hesitate to say that my mom and my grandmother were painters because it sounds like, oh, well, check, check. Like she's already got like two generations of, and it's simply not true. I would say both of them actually were painters, but they both had 5 kids. And art, talk about being put in a box and in the closet. Like my mom, she like has this portfolio from her one semester at art school. And I think that was the last time she created. So in her 20s. But I think they both saw the value and knew how important it was. And so it was always like it was available. There was tools available. Um, but like I didn't really start trusting myself and listening until probably like about 10 years ago, actually. It took me falling, spraining my ankle, breaking my foot, all like I was wearing flip-flops and I missed a half of a stair. Just the flukes. And then I also the entire HR department at my job was laid off. So it was like blow after blow and kind of putting me in a corner of, well, it looks like this is my option. And realizing too, I remember being in college and being like, I just don't have time. I just don't have time to create. And I think that's our excuse a lot is I just don't have time. But we all know we have time when we make time. And so it was that
Yeah, you look at your phone usage and you're like, yep, I
you have time.
have
Yeah,
time.
you have time. It's just what kind of sacrifice are you willing to make? Where's your priority list? And I think that that's the biggest thing. So I would say there is a bit of a natural talent, but that natural talent is almost more your inclination. You just have a stronger itch than maybe others because you have seen it or you have felt it before. Where someone coming to the art world that grew up in a family of engineers has no idea. But let me tell you, I've got a lot of engineers in my family. They're some of the most creative, incredible drawers because they're ability of observation and their knack to then recreate that. They have incredible hand-eye coordination. So I feel like it's the whole argument of nature versus nurture, and maybe the medium that you're using leans more heavily into one, talent versus practice. But I will say that anyone can learn to paint. And I mean, you look at like a Thomas Kincaid, or I have a few friends that they teach painting, or the paint and sips. Like, you show up, you get your wine, you make a mark here, you make a mark here, you follow the instructor. And so technically you can become a technical provider of art, and you can make things, you know, copy and paste with time. But I think that there is that, when you actually become an artist, I think that's craftsmanship. I think when you actually become an artist is when you use those skills that you've learned, and then you learn how to break those rules, and you start to trust that voice. Like when that voice, like the next step in the book says use orange, and that voice inside goes, what about purple? And that's when you choose to listen and lean into purple instead of the next direction, that's when you're starting to move from craftsmanship into the art realm. And you
Oof.
get
Sarah, okay, like tears are coming to my eyes right now as
oh,
you're sharing because I was starting to share with you before we hit record, and listeners can't see this, but I did a little bit of Sarah's new book in her watercolor book, Cafe and Bloom, third watercoloring book. And on page 38, there are these parrot tulips that I was drawing, or not drawing, I was watercoloring. And I noticed like my intuition was just kind of like, you don't want to leave it white here. Like let's keep using some color. And there's a whole amazing section, and I love watercolors, but I've never felt like I've had training to like understand how to mix colors and think about the palette. And so I love how this book, as a side note, I love how this book has these aspects, because it was really empowering to be like, okay, I'm going to play with making this color. And I made up this kind of yellowy orange color, and then was like, oh, this looks good. Let me put another layer of like this on it. And I just started to listen to my intuition instead of, okay, the instructions said stop here. So I so appreciate you calling that piece out. And not because it just gives my little ego a boost of like, oh, I'm becoming a creator. I also want to talk about like the inner critic that pops up when we're creating, because it can get loud. Like I noticed, and it happens even in cooking too, of, oh, you chop that too big, or the seasoning is, and this is one of the things I love to support people with mindful cooking practices, is like it's an opportunity to hear our voices and get present and like cut through the crap that can creep up. And when I was making this watercolor, I just noticed, oh, are you doing this right? Or, oh, how many times you have to do this? And how many times you have to clear off your paintbrush to then get it clean, to then add more of the. And I was just like bouncing around and noticing all that noise. First of all, do you still have an inner critic that pops up? And if so, how do you be in relationship to that voice?
mm, that's so good. Yeah, it's beautiful. I know your listeners can't hear, but good job leaning in and doing the yellow and not being done, and choosing to listen. So I think that that's the inner critic in that example of orange versus purple, or even what you were doing would be like, no, 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 the instructions say da 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 da. And you either choose to listen to that, or you choose to lean in and try something new. And that's where the art comes. And of course, the moment you choose purple, or you add another color beyond the instructions, or you chopped your onions too big, our automatic response is like, stop, stop, you messed it up. You messed it up. Now you've wasted all of your time. Good job trying something new. You were so brave, but it looks like crap. We knew it wasn't going to be worth the time. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with her. She's loud. Uh, there's so many things to say on the inner critic. It's almost like embarrassing, I find, in groups of creatives to even own that as a professional, you still hear it. But in all honesty, the more creatives I speak to and the more professionals that are grounded and honest, I don't think the inner critic ever goes away. I think that it's someone we just have to learn. I don't know if it's something that we're all born with as humans, or if it's like our westernized left brain, analytical, cross your T's, dot your I's, just so thinking, which is all helpful when we're trying to put other things together. But when you're trying to be creative, um, that voice often feels like a killjoy. Um,
Yeah, and just to interject for a moment, the like
yeah,
inner critic that we all have, this gremlin, is its job is to keep us safe. So like
right,
it doesn't want me to like when you said that earlier of like, oh, you just wasted your time and now, you it looks like shit. Like it's just it wants you to do the safe option, but that's false.
right, right.
So, okay,
Safe,
keep
safe
sharing.
isn't, yeah, safe is not always the best option. I also think when you said that safe, um, I have like a to-do list, surprise, surprise, in my notes, and it syncs with my computer and my phone so that wherever I am, I can add to my to-do list and I can also check it off, Enneagram 3, right? But at the top of my to-do list, I have a quote that says, "Do not let fear decide your day." And so it's every choice that I make, I can choose. Sometimes safety is the best choice. However, when it comes to creative choices, I don't necessarily think that that is. I think that it can steer you wrong. And so it's learning to step outside of where you feel uncomfortable, and then realizing that you have to create like 100 pieces of crap and constantly be pushing yourself. Otherwise, you're going to always be vanilla. You're always going to be on the safe path. Um, Zootopia, in the beginning, I don't know if you've seen it, but Shakira is in it. She's great. She's this great antelope.
Mm.
But in the beginning, it's bunnies and they're anthropomorphized, right? But it's these bunny parents trying to explain to their daughter why she shouldn't be a bunny cop, for all the reasons, like how is a bunny cop going to chase down the foxes? Um, and they're like, you need to choose safe. That's how your mother and I are happy. We're safe and we never get out and adventure. And I'm like, oh, it's such a good, I mean, it was such a good commentary on society. And like you said, sometimes it's necessary, but other times I think it's where when you're hearing it in art, good is often good is often the enemy of great. So you can stop when it's good. You followed the instructions, you've done the work, you've crafted your piece. But when you say, you know what, I'm not going to choose the safe route, and if this does get messed up by me taking this chance, it was worth it, that's when you start to grow. Especially in art, good is always the enemy of great. So oftentimes if I'm like at my retreats and stuff, we usually have time to explore this, but like we'll do a bouquet, and I'll have a live, bouquet of flowers, and we will draw it first twice, and then we paint it twice. And what I say is, on one side is your practice and the other is your final. And what ends up happening, I mean, almost 9 times out of 10, is that the one that was the practice, quote unquote, is the one where we felt free to make the bold choices. And those are the ones that people are like, I want this to be in my art gallery. I didn't follow the rules. I made the pot green instead of black. And I like did this wonky thing with the poly crayons, and I didn't know that it would work. So I tried it in my practice, but because I made that bold choice and I said, you know what, inner critic, you have all control of the left piece, you have no control on the right piece. And so oftentimes people end up liking that right piece, or they learn from it. They learn that you can't layer something like this on top of another, or they learn, hey, I should have not used the pen, or wow, I really like the pen. So it's usually one of my best ways, even as I'm creating, especially like in my flow state when I'm creating, having two side by side that I'm constantly switching between. It really helps. And it makes you more productive too, which is fun.
Wow. So, because that I think highlights a lot of our human brain, especially those who tend to be in the Enneagram 3 or perfectionism, high achieving, when we label something as a practice. Like I talk about meditation practice. It's not like there's a final every time you sit to do it. And I think a lot of people take it so seriously to the point of, white knuckling it of like, oh, I'm not good at this because my mind is talking to me. It's like, that is the point. Your mind is supposed to be talking to you, and we get very critical then of it's supposed to go this certain way. So just even calling it a practice, how I hope that it softens people's drive and this inner striving that they feel like they need to be making it perfect. And so I love this example you're sharing that you do in your art retreats, because it is so poignant of how we can kind of like drop the shoulds and the like what are images and the reflection back of what society is telling us, and let our own wisdom and sparkle lead.
Yeah. Well, there's wisdom in the fact that, everyone says like practice an attitude of gratitude, right? That's like one of the guaranteed ways, like list the things you're grateful for. So I like to encourage people to like list three things that they like about the piece. Even if they don't like the piece itself, they can find three things that they like. And one thing that I work on myself with my inner critic is I am not crap. This piece of work ended up as crap. I am the mastermind that is taking chaos and creating cosmos. But for some reason, this one didn't work out. And so, really, that inner critic, then she can come in and she can be like, oh, well, this is why it didn't work. And then she can be like, oh, but I really do like da 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 da. I like that we used that color. I like that we tried this next time. So the inner critic is there like to keep you safe, but then also to kind of help you have that analytical thinking, right? But it's the taking the onus of shame or guilt or somehow inadequacy when I mean, you've won just by showing up to create. Like you're already winning. You're there. So knowing that you can't fail, that the piece may fail, but you, the creator, has not failed in any way, that frees you up to go, oh, I can just make another one. I'm here still, even if the paper is like got holes in it because I rubbed it raw, right? So there is a mentality where when you feel like crap because you created crap, that's an automatic creation stopper. It's so discouraging, you rarely pick up the pen again. But going, no, I have the ideas, I've got the ideas, I just don't have the skills to match my ideas yet. It's that piece that's crap, and then you can kind of laugh and move on and take the pieces you like and what you've learned. So I think there's a way to sit at your desk with the critic and figure out her great attributes too, right? But also know when not to listen to her. So,
I love those ways to balance, because as you illuminated, like, yeah, we are all going, we can't, the inner critic doesn't die. We can just be in a healthier relationship with it, one where they're not in the driver's seat. And I love that attitude of gratitude of training the brain to start to then look for what's working, what you do like in that painting or that piece of creation, and how these skills can be applicable to people who are in corporate, when you're thinking about a presentation or a slide deck you just designed or how you just spoke in a meeting. We can still work with our inner critic in those ways, I think are really helpful.
yeah, it's a training of our brain, right? It's so much easier to follow the path, to not forge out on your own. It's so much easier to just get discouraged, but like that training of like even writing three things down that went well. Like I do the same thing. Like I'll go to a party and I'll come back and I'll be like, did I really just tell that story? Oh my gosh. And then like, you replay it in your mind like hundreds of times. And really, that person that you're just agonized, they don't even remember the conversation and you're killing yourself for hours. So I think that it's in corporate and yeah, man, it is so nice to start practicing that. Practice three things in anything that you're beating yourself up about. What were three things that went well? So it's retraining your brain, I really think. We're
Yeah.
talking about brain science, but
Yeah. Oh my God, Sarah, I could keep talking to you forever. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and creativity with us. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, the time went by really fast. Wait, you're amazing. Okay, I would say Instagram, the Mint Gardener is probably going to be the most up to date. But then my website is themintgardener.com and then /links, and that will give you kind of just where I'm teaching classes, what's the newest book, where you can get all the supplies so that you don't have to worry about trying to figure everything out on your own. I've done that legwork for you. Yeah, I think those two spots are probably the best. Always send me a DM. It's really me talking and answering. So be nice.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll get a voice note back, like I did while you're on your Peloton. It's amazing because you're like, yes, this is so
That is
great.
that's a three multitasking in the best way, right?
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Wade, for having me.
What a beautiful conversation that was with Sarah. I hope you learned a lot about yourself. Most importantly, know that you are not alone in navigating the inner critic, and may you be inspired to continue to create whatever that means to you. I used to think that creating was just for quote unquote artists, people who consider themselves artists or that was their job. But really, I've learned that it is our natural life force to create and how we've really lost connection to that. So I so enjoyed this conversation with Sarah. Join us on Instagram to continue the conversation. Share with us what you're excited to create. Get her watercoloring books, try them out. They're so much fun. Join me for your writing practice by doing some journaling and create with your own wisdom. Tapping into that place of intuition is such a gift. I welcome you to think of somebody in your community who would benefit from listening to this podcast episode. Take a moment to share it with them. Let them know what inspired you and what made you think about them. This is a great way to build connection with the people that we love, whether they're near or far, share education, and support each other tapping into our own hearts. Until next time, stay centered.